that right now.
Thank you, Ms. Marks.
You are welcome.
Here we go. All right, I think everybody is in. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, junior parents. Believe it or not, this is our third parent meeting of the year already. You'd think we'd be experts at this point, but we're still trying to figure out this the technical world of Zoom. But we are very grateful to have you all here. I know it's a very busy time right now. But we really felt strongly that we should get this information out to you. So that's why we kind of rush it in the beginning of the year to give you as much time for all of this information. I want to introduce everyone who is here with us tonight. I am Kelly Keene. I am one of the school counselors at the high school. We also have Miss Marks here with us, and Miss Rivera, and Miss Holzer. Hi there. And our patriarch, Mr. Altman. So tonight tends to be one of our longer meetings because there is a lot of information that we give you about junior year and a little bit about the beginning of senior year, things that you need to know. So get comfortable, get a glass of wine if you need one. The one thing we do not want is we do not want you to feel overwhelmed, okay? You may feel overwhelmed with some of the things that we're talking about, but if I can tell you anything to remember as the night goes on, you don't need to be in any certain place at this point. You have, and in 2 years left of high school, your students have 2 years left of high school. There's plenty of time left to turn things around, to get things going. So we do not want to overwhelm anyone tonight. We are just simply giving you the information and the tools to set you up in the best possible situation for the next couple of years. We want to keep you informed, but we understand that there's only so much information that we can kind of give you tonight. This meeting is going to be recorded just like all of our other meetings. We have found that to be tremendously helpful because I, for instance, have had some seniors coming in over the last few weeks, and they're a little behind in the process, whatever process they need to be in. And I'm able to say to them, listen, go home tonight and check out some of the videos that we have on our YouTube channel, and it'll catch you right up. Okay. So we do have, speaking of that, we have a YouTube channel now. We have an Instagram page, I think it's called, and a Facebook page. All of them are at TZHS Counseling. So the YouTube channel, we're starting to fill up with lots of videos on all important things that you may or may not know. So if you ever are thinking, I'm not really sure what she's talking about, it might be on our YouTube channel, and you might be able to just sit down and watch it with your son or daughter and kind of get caught up to speed. So another good thing is that you can kind of watch this at any point throughout the year. You don't have to remember everything in your brain right now or take meticulous notes right now. You can always refer back to everything. There is going to be plenty of time at the end for question and answer. Sometimes that's one of the more important aspects of the night, and where some people get majority of their information. There's a chat, so please feel free as the night goes on to add any questions you have to the chat. If you're brave enough at the end of the meeting, feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question. We haven't had anyone really do that yet, but maybe tonight's the first night. We'll do the best we can at the end to answer all of those questions. I also just wanted to give you a little disclaimer that you're going to hear, unfortunately, like everywhere else, you're going to hear a lot tonight about COVID. We did the best we could trying to update this presentation to give you as best information as we can about COVID. Obviously, we don't know what the world or college admissions or school is going to look like a year from now. But like everything else, we're doing our best. We're rolling with it. We're constantly on the internet. We're constantly on chats trying to figure out what's going on to give you guys the best information we can. So you're going to notice that some things may be a little different in case you have a son or daughter who might have been older or graduated a few years ago. We're trying to update things and make them a little bit more COVID related. As much as we hate doing that and we can't wait for this time in our lives to be over with, we got to face it. I talked about our social media pages. So that's kind of the administrative stuff. So I want to get started with what lies ahead in junior year. One of the reasons that we have bumped up this presentation is to discuss, sorry, hold on, that's not working. One of the reasons that we wanted to bump up this presentation is because the PSATs are coming next week for your children. They're on the 14th. You should have gotten plenty of information regarding what your son or daughter should do that day. If you do have any questions, you're not quite sure what to do, please feel free to reach out to us. We usually don't tell students that to do too much prep for the PSAT because we want a real picture of what their results will look like when they sit and take the actual test later on. So it's really not that much that you need to worry about at this point. If this is the first you're hearing that they're taking the PSAT on the 14th, that's perfectly fine. Don't worry, but just send them to school that day with a pencil and a calculator and a good breakfast. The results, we usually get the results back towards the end of December. They will, all your students will end up getting a College Board account, and the results will come through on that account. And we will go over it with them when the time is right, depending on when the results come in. It's usually, we get 2 dates. I think it was December 7th and 8th. Was that correct? Yes. Yeah. So the results come in at some point over the course of 2 days, and then we try to meet with them as quickly as we can to go over the results and next steps. Junior family meetings. So junior family meetings got greatly disrupted last year, and we're kind of feeling the brunt of that now. Junior family meetings are incredibly important in the process. This is where we discuss what the next steps are for your son or daughter, whether or not they are going off to something like the military, or if they're going to take a gap year, or if they're going to go into the workforce, or if they're going to go to college. This is where we start planning for what that's going to look like and what you as a family need to do to plan. So those meetings, we usually start in January of this year, of junior year is what I mean. Depending on the way the world is going to be in the spring, we found lots of families skipped these meetings last year. We were downright harassing people to please try and get them done. But we also understood that with everything that was going on, it wasn't the most important thing. But we are finding now that kids are just starting, and some are feeling a little overwhelmed. So if there's, any way that you could squeeze that meeting in, it's usually about an hour with your counselor, with your student. We go over what their interests are, what they might want to do in the future. It's a pretty important meeting. SAT and ACT prep, we're going to discuss SAT and ACT going forward in the meeting. College visits, we put a little COVID disclaimer there because they're a little different now. They are all virtual. You may have heard some seniors talking about the virtual meetings that college reps are initiating and students are joining. SAT and SAT subject text, that's all going to be discussed later on in the meeting. The parent perspective sheet and the junior questionnaire on Naviance, those are kind of administrative things that we want to get taken care of before the end of students' junior year. And those are things, again, that will be discussed fully during that junior family meeting. So again, that junior family meeting coming up in the spring, which, believe it or not, will be here before we know it. That's a pretty important meeting. You get a lot of information there. Next up, what lies ahead in senior year. So there you go, junior year's over. Everybody did a great job. Here we are. And now it's time to discuss actual next steps and really going forward with the process. One of the first things that we do when we come back to school is we do workshops for students, for seniors, and we discuss their Naviance accounts and their Common Application accounts. This year, we had to kind of figure it out on the fly. Normally what we do is we go into the computer labs, and we actually work with them directly. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that this year with everything that's going on. So we made some pretty informative videos that we then sent out to the seniors multiple times now, with all of the information that would have been discussed at that meeting in the computer lab, and asked students to watch this, take these steps, and do what needed to be done. So we're trying to figure things out in this crazy world that we're living in, but that's something that happens right in the beginning of senior year. We also have a senior parent workshop, which is similar to this. We kind of go over a lot of the same material and freshen things up for parents. Again, SATs and ACTs will be discussed in a few minutes. So will the deadlines. The deadlines, there's a lot, as you can see, this used to be regular admission and early decision back in the day, but as you can see, there's quite a few different deadlines now that will be discussed a little bit later in the meeting. Some of you hopefully attended the financial aid workshop last week. It was a really informative workshop on what needs to happen. It's really great for seniors who are currently, and senior parents who are currently going through the process. But we try to encourage juniors to go, or even sophomore parents, to check it out as well, because it can kind of help you prepare for things that you can't just do at the last minute during senior year. So again, that workshop that we just had last week is on our YouTube channel. So if you missed that, please feel free to go back and check it out. It'll have a lot of good information for your class as well. Then the financial aid filing deadline, that will all be in the meeting online, and then the college deposits. This must feel like it is a lifetime away for current juniors. But from this point going forward to May 1st of your senior year can sometimes fly by. And what we don't want to happen is it to fly by and all of a sudden it's October of your senior year and you really haven't gotten on board yet, because then that can feel really overwhelming. And that's something that we always try to be mindful of. So what is the counselor's role? So we have many different roles, which is probably why most of us became school counselors, because we like all the varied aspects of our job. But junior year and senior year, we do work very closely with our students as best as we can to prepare them for after high school. One of the things that we talk about, and we try to start talking about in freshman and sophomore year, is trying to get to know students and get to know what are their interests. So during our scheduling process, which we typically do in the spring, one of the questions that we ask all of our students is, it may seem a little early, but do you have any interests? Do you know what you want to do going forward? And we start to get an idea that some students may want to go to maybe a trade school and not your typical college route. Then we start to realize which students are really college focused and, have a certain college in mind or a certain career path in mind. And we start working with them as the years go by to reach that goal. So discussing post-secondary options is a big push for us. A big part of that is college choice, and which is also kind of career choice as well. So we try to help students find the colleges that meet their all of their varied interests. Ms. Holzer is going to talk much more in depth about finding your best fit college and how you go about finding your best fit college, and helping you create a balanced list. So we really try to start that process again during that junior parent meeting in the spring. So again, kind of reach out, think about that meeting, and it's, could be a good time to maybe even just start having these conversations around the dinner table, so that when that meeting does come and when the time does come to start buckling down with all of this, you guys have already had some conversations. Obviously, we provide answers to questions along the way, and that is really something that we want to implore you to do. We hate hearing about parents who might have been online at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts and they heard another family talking about they're doing this and they're doing that, and they feel like they're very far behind or they didn't hear anything. Just always, when in doubt, reach out to us. Send us an email, give us a call. We will help walk you through. We don't want anyone hearing about myths or things like that and getting too concerned. We're here to help you with any questions that you have along the way. We are your experts. Please reach out to us and lean on us with any questions that come up along the way. Even if you don't think it's a question that is necessarily for us to answer, we will help you answer that question. Another thing that we, over the last few years, have really tried to foster is family communication. We have found, and I believe Mr. Altman is going to discuss this later on in the meeting, but we have found that fostering family communication and helping families communicate better throughout this process helps the entire process go smoother. We will often have, not often, fortunately, because hopefully we're doing a pretty good job, but sometimes you'll have a parent and a student in the room and the kid is like, all right, I'm going to California. And the parent's like, you're not going to California. And the kid's like, no. And then, you're spending all of this time, and, it's a way for us to kind of start that process a little bit earlier. And so it doesn't feel like a disappointment to the student, and it doesn't feel like any sort of like a power struggle in the family. So open communication is best. Something else that we are really pushing, and if you've been on any other of our meetings throughout the year, we really want to encourage our students to be as independent as they can, because not only are we trying to help them find their college that they want to go to, but we want them to go to that college and we want them to be successful. That is really the most important thing. And I know that you all feel the same way. So high school can be a really great way to teach them how to take care of things on their own. So we always want to have the best communication that we can with parents and with families, but we really want it to be student driven. And obviously sometimes that's going to be really hard for certain students, but we want to be involved in that process of trying to get them to that point so that when they do graduate high school and they do move on, they've had quite a few years now of experience advocating for themselves and asking for their own help and coming to their counselor or their teacher or maybe even an assistant principal with some questions or to find an answer to something, because that, just like studying math, is a tool that they're going to need once they move out of high school and they move into college. So you'll hear us very often talk about autonomy and talk about independence and talk about students advocating for themselves and speaking up for themselves. And I really hope that there are a lot of juniors actually on this call tonight and that they're taking on this role themselves because they know that this is really their future. So if there are any juniors out there, hi guys, thanks for coming. But this is really something that we as a department feel very strongly about, and you'll hear us talking about it a lot over the next year or so, having the student advocate for themselves. So I feel like I gave you a whole mouthful in a pretty short amount of time. And next, I'm going to pass it on to Ms. Holzer so that she can discuss a little bit more specifics about the process going forward. Yep, you're on mute.
I was trying to avoid the "you're on mute" prompt.
Sorry.
I've seen that on t-shirts now, "you're on mute." Thanks for joining us, everyone, tonight. I actually consider my part I consider myself lucky to have my slides tonight because I think I get to talk about maybe some more of the fun and exciting aspects of this process. But I do want to piggyback on some of what Mrs. Keene said about this, about the Junior Family Conference. That is a time you're going to receive a lot of general information tonight, but that Junior Family Conference is an opportunity for us to sit down either on Zoom or in our offices to have conversations specific to your child and specific to their plans. So while a lot of this information is very general tonight, I want to just emphasize that we will have conversations specific to each child. And part of what we touch on in those junior family conferences are, once we determine that a student is, focused on attending college in their postgraduate planning, we focus on forming what we call the list. And that list has a lot of factors to consider. And why I said that this can be the more fun and exciting part to talk about is because I like to call this the shopping phase. And for some of my students, that excites them. And for some of my students, that gets an eye roll and a grunt of, oh, I got to go shopping. But I do think it can be really fun to talk about all of the different possibilities that lie ahead. There's so many negative words associated with this process often. Stressful, nervous, overwhelmed. But I do think that we can shift the mentality of the college process from those more negative words to things like exciting and, you know, interesting and, you know, looking forward to all of the different possibilities that there are. Because right now, this is an opportunity for students to be researching and deciding where they want to go and what is of interest to them in this process before we get to senior year and the tables turn and they feel evaluated. This is an opportunity for students and families to be doing the evaluating. So some of those conversations can start as soon as now. You're going to hear some tips for best ways to approach this process and some of our philosophies that we encourage towards the end of this presentation. But one of them is to not become all consumed by this process. So I do think, you know, sometimes speaking about these things a little bit at a time can be more helpful than a junior hearing the word college every night from now until they put their applications out in senior year. So I think a sprinkle of these conversations to start is really best. Right now, the priority is still just to be a junior. Nothing drives this process more than a strong high school transcript. So the focus really should always be on grades and how they're doing in their classes and their investment in their classes. And then this can be kind of a fun side job to start talking and putting the pieces together about the work they're doing now and where that might lead. So some factors to consider in developing a list. It's conversations, you know, some of the very obvious, the geographic location. You know, how far from home is really comfortable. And maybe some of those conversations are changing given our current climate about a family's comfort level with how far a student is going at this point. So that's a conversation to have as well. Are we open to the entire United States? Are we looking to go abroad to college? Do we want to explore the SUNY system? Is that something that's important? So starting to talk a bit about that. Enrollment really has to do with the size of a college campus. Colleges campus range in sizes comparable to Tappan Zee High School. We call those small to extra large colleges with 40,000 students on campus. So talking about where students might see themselves and feel comfortable. I often say that students tend to, when posed with this question, I call it the Goldilocks schools. They always say not too small, not too big, medium, just right. So exploring what that comfort level might be. Some students really like a small niche and some students really want that large rah-rah effect of a college campus. Environment. You know, students are growing up just outside of New York City. Many are very, you know, enthusiastic about a more urban environment. So they are looking towards colleges in, you know, cities like Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C. Is that something that's important to them? But also, what does that campus look like? What does that environment look like? There's college campuses that don't have a campus. So you can step off of, you know, you can step out of your dorm room building, you could step out of your classroom building and you're on the streets of Boston or you're on the streets of New York City. And then there's more enclosed campuses. So that's a conversation to have as well. Some students, you know, have grown up so close to New York City and to a more urban environment that they're saying, you know what, now I want to go to Penn State where I'll be living on a cornfield. Although with 40,000 students on a cornfield, it doesn't feel quite like that. So having those conversations about areas and where we might want to be. Types of institutions typically also speaks to the bullet 2 more down, cost. This is the conversation to have about our public versus private institutions. We are very fortunate to live in New York State with a top tier state university system. I think second only to California is the SUNY system, which houses every college major that a student would be interested in exploring, and comes at the cost of an in-state tuition because we're New York State residents. And I think for a lot of families, that's something to consider, because I do think that a less expensive education is not a devalued education. So oftentimes, you know, the professors who are teaching on a private college campus are also the same adjunct professors teaching at a public college campus. So your education is not devalued because the cost is less expensive by attending a public versus private institution. Some families do a mix of both. Some families also want to talk about the conversation between starting off at 2-year schools and then transferring to a 4-year school, which can sometimes have merit in again, lowering the cost of a college education. Oftentimes it can help a student to become more aware of what it is they might want to study. They can better develop their path. So we also have Rockland Community College right in our backyard, which also has a very reputable honors program that some students might want to explore as well. So having those conversations about the types of institutions. Major is sometimes a tough one. We sit down in those January family college conferences and we say, you know, have you given thought to what you might want to study? It's okay when the answer is, I don't know. Very rarely do 16, 17-year-olds who are sitting in our chairs know exactly what it is they want to study. And oftentimes when they tell us, we find out many years later that they've changed their mind, maybe upwards towards, I think the average college student is changing their major upwards towards 3 times before they graduate. So it's okay to not know exactly what it is. It's okay that they don't know exactly what it is they want to study. Some students, though, have started to get a sense of an idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are. And sometimes that can be just as valuable. The student who sits down in your chair and says, I do not want to study science, or I can't wait to never take another math class again, or I know I'm definitely, you know, not going in a humanities direction. That can be just as valuable in those conversations as we try and sort towards majors of interest. Or maybe they're thinking about things. Maybe they're saying, maybe I want to study business. Maybe I want to look into education. And what we want to do then is make sure that those majors are there on a college campus for a student to explore and really, you know, look into as a possibility. So the college major is something to be considering and thinking about. It doesn't need to be something that by the time they sit down with us, they feel as though they're declaring that as their, you know, their lifelong choice. Then there's other factors that come into play on a campus that students might be considering in shaping their list. Things like student diversity and social life. Social life can sometimes be, is this campus a campus that's heavily, the social life is heavily fraternities and sororities? Is that something that's of interest to me? Is that something that's not of interest to me? Special interests and programs can sometimes be athletics, or students who want to then go on to participate in music ensembles like an orchestra or a choir. Do those programs exist? Are there strong club sports at the college? That can sometimes help to shape and drive a list as well when students are researching and looking into college campuses. Prestige is one we hesitate to put on the list, but we know is a conversation that's happening at home. I call this sometimes the bumper sticker effect. You know, am I proud of the college, you know, that I'm putting on, that I'm getting that sticker and putting on the bumper of my car? And for a lot of students, they equate prestige, and they garner that pride with how hard a college is to get into. That is not our philosophy in how we look at it. Although many times our students sit down and they say to us, I want to go to the hardest college that I could get into. Because there's something about that high selectivity that, you know, that they feel proud about. Our philosophy is to work with students to develop a well-rounded list that concentrates on their best fit. So not only, you know, how highly selective is it, how hard is it to get into, but is this a school I could go to and be happy, a school where I can thrive and feel good? And sometimes that's conversations about, you know, do I want to be the big fish in the small pond? Do I want everybody to be as, you know, academically competitive? Do I want to be in a very what kind of environment do I want to be in a college campus? So we're looking at all these different factors to develop that list. And of course, selectivity is part of that, because there is an overarching question of, after we've looked at all of this, can I get in? And we want students to reach high, and we want them to go for schools because they've worked hard, and they should give it a shot to see if they could get in. But we want to cushion that list with what you've probably heard of in 3 categories as reach, targets, and safeties. I stopped saying safeties. I'm trying to stop saying safeties for a couple of different reasons. One, because I've seen some things happen where I thought it was going to be safe and maybe it wasn't so safe. But also because I feel like as soon as I say the word safe, I've now taken that college and I've lessened it in a student's mind. Because we're confident they could get in, they no longer want to go there. They could do better. But I caution to say, hey, you could get in, but are you going to be happy there? Would you thrive there? Does it have everything that you want? Then we should be open-minded to researching it and putting it on the list. So I now kind of call that list the more comfortable list in an effort to avoid that word safety. Did we lose Miss Keene, who's controlling the presentation? Oh, there we go. Thank you so much. So once we've developed that list, and I keep saying, you know, look into it and research it, there's okay, so now I have this list of colleges. What do I do with this? And there's a lot of ways to research colleges and look into them and to determine, you know, after they show up on your list for fulfilling all of the factors, of trying to find out more about whether or not you'd be happy on that college campus. So how to find out more? Talk to us. Between all of us, we've been to, I'm going to go ahead and say, hundreds of college campuses. And before this past year, we try and make it a priority to get out every year and see more and more schools to familiarize ourselves with the campuses that students are applying to. But not only have we visited college campuses, but we've also now counseled, probably collectively between us, thousands of students who have applied to college. And we have a sense now of, you know, what the types of students that are attracted to these particular college campuses. And we might be able to give you a frame of reference in talking about these colleges to determine if it would be a school that you'd be interested in learning more about. And by the way, when I say that we've now all, you know, collectively counseled thousands of students, I think we could all agree that we have, throughout all the process with each individual student, it always works out, right, guys? It always works out. So again, those words in the beginning that I mentioned, that stress, that fear about, you know, will I get into schools? Yes. Have we seen students be disappointed with not getting into first, second choices? Sometimes, yes. But oftentimes students will then come back and they'll visit us on those first, you know, Thanksgiving or Christmas breaks, and they'll say, I'm so glad I'm where I ended up. I was supposed to be here, because they go off and they meet friends and they, you know, are inspired by professors. And it turns out that there's not just that one place. So please rest assured that it does work out, but talk to us. We can offer a lot of information on the college campuses that we've seen and what we've learned from working with students and what we've learned from talking to hundreds of colleges reps over the years. College visits. This used to be the very best way to determine if a school was a good fit, to actually get on the campus, to look around, to see the students who go there, to see the surrounding area, to see the campus, to sit in a classroom setting. Some colleges also host overnights where students could really get a college experience. Of course, a lot of that is halted right now. because with all the social distancing guidelines in place, a lot of college campus tours have been suspended. The opportunity to host students who are not current students have been suspended. I'm hopeful that we'll start to resume some normalcy, but in the interim, everything has become virtual. And I have to say, colleges are going above and beyond with creating opportunities for students to learn about their campuses. They're hosting, current student panels for question and answers. I think the virtual visits are more available. It used to be that on the more popular months of, the February and the April breaks, when students are out there visiting college campuses, you could get closed out of a tour because it's such a busy time. You can't get closed out of a virtual session. So I think that there's more availability to learn about colleges, and there is still the opportunity as we get into the spring and it becomes, more timely to do so, to still get in the car and drive around college campuses. It just won't be right now as formal as the information session and tour, but there's still so much that you could get out of all the virtual opportunities that colleges are creating. College websites host a lot of valuable information as well. I have to say, probably the most valuable information to get from college websites is more insight about their academic course offerings. So looking into the different majors that they offer, and then the courses that fall under that particular major that students would take, and familiarizing yourself with their academics on the college websites. College websites also house all of the information about the actual admissions process. So you can go to their websites as well, just to get an idea of what the application procedures will look like. But that really fast forwards into really the end of this year and the beginning of next year, the senior year. As I mentioned, speaking with office reps, almost all of them now are doing things virtually, where you can get right on a college website and sign up for virtual information sessions. And then college reps are always available via email or by phone to discuss any questions that students might have or families might have. And then Naviance. Naviance is, I think my whole next slide is Naviance, so we can skip to that. Naviance is a tool that we introduced current juniors to last year. We had to introduce them to it virtually because it's typically a push-in activity that we do through their English classes. So this past April, the English teachers sent out a link to students to walk them through the registration process for this very important program. That information session and orientation to Naviance is still available on our YouTube channel by searching TZHS Counseling. So students didn't get a chance to do that. There's still plenty of opportunity to do so. We introduce students to Naviance by asking them to do a survey called Do What You Are. It's a personality inventory that gives them a sense of what their personality type is, and then ties that personality type to career interests that might match that personality. Naviance also houses a number of different career interest inventories and surveys that students can take in order to start getting a sense of connecting the dots, figuring out what they're doing now, what their strengths, what their weaknesses are, and kind of tying that to this process of, or this sense of, going off to college, and putting a bit of a why to it, answering the question of why do I want to go to college? We oftentimes, I think it's just, that's what you do. You go to high school, you graduate, and you go to college, but we skip the why. What's the purpose? What's the reason for going to college? And it's in order to study something that would be an area of interest where you would pursue a career. So we want to start to give them a sense of that why. So we start off with the career interest inventory and the personality inventory, and students can go back and they can look at that. And then this year, we really we focus on using Naviance as more of a college search tool. Naviance houses years and years of Tappan Zee High School statistics about the colleges that students have applied to, what their GPAs were, the average standardized test score accepted to institutions, and it shows it to students to prospective students on something called the scatogram. So they can get a sense of average GPAs and standardized test scores accepted at the colleges that students commonly apply to from Tappan Zee High School. We show them 3 years worth of data, while the program probably at this point houses about 15 years of data. 3 years is really the most relevant and the most valuable to them because the data, is constantly changing. So 3 years is the most relevant in what they see. But it gives them a sense of, as I mentioned before, forming that selectivity. So they can get a sense for themselves, is this that reach school, is this that target school, or is this a school that I can kind of count on as one of my more comfortable schools? So they can see that for themselves by using this program. This program is also a really great organizational tool where students can go on, they can research a college, and they can say, you know what, this is a college I really want to come back to. They can heart it, or they can like it, they can add it to the colleges I'm thinking about list, and they can go back to get a lot of really valuable information and keep that school on a list so they don't forget about it. Naviance is also a really great place for students to do some resume building. Students can go in and they can put a lot of their activities in that they've been doing throughout grades 9 through what they expect to do in grades 12. And they can keep a running list of the activities and the involvements that they've had: work, employment, babysitting, lawn mowing, whatever it is that they're doing to keep busy. They can house that in Naviance as well, which really comes in handy in their senior year when they're asked to create a student resume or fill out the student activity section of their applications, which you'll hear a little bit more about. So these are all the tools, these are all the resources to create a college list. And like I said, I do really think that this can be the fun and the exciting part, to think about all the possibilities that come next. This is students and families evaluating colleges. And now we'll talk a little bit about how the colleges then evaluate students.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm just going to talk about what the colleges are looking for and some things that students are often curious about, like how do I begin an application? So first, the colleges are looking for a completed application. And what that means is that most students will do their applications online. There's 2 popular application sites, and they're right there, the Common App and the Coalition. The Coalition accepts over 140 colleges, and Common App accepts over 300 colleges. We encourage the students to use Common App. So if it is that your college is accepting Common App, you want to make sure that you use Common App. And most students are able to start their Common App account over the summer. So the summer right before senior year, they could get a lot of work done on their college application process. The only way that we wouldn't recommend that you use Common App is if the school does not accept it. And so then you would go directly to the school website. Some of the things that that you are going to include on your applications, of course, in filling out the application, is your demographic information, academics, activities, and this is also where the student uploads their personal essay. Some schools require more than just one personal essay, and what you will find is that when you put your colleges on Common App, they will give you information on what the college wants from the student. So there's a list of schools, and they will have questions that the school would like the student to answer, and any other additional requirements that the school would like for the application. So now the essay. As a junior, it's important for you to start thinking about your personal essay and the necessary supporting documents that you're going to need for your application. In the springtime, we will provide essay prompts that the Common App usually gives us so that we can get you started on what you should think about writing about. The essay is used by the college to really get to know the student, who they are, what they would like to see. Also is how well the student writes, how creative they are. And so it's not only about you just sharing a story, it's also about you checking your grammar, being creative. So it's something that we recommend that most students spend some time on, because it's difficult for them to talk about themselves. It's the first opportunity they've had to perhaps answer a question about what was your biggest obstacle in life and how did you overcome it. And it takes some time to think about, well, how did I overcome that? And what has been my biggest obstacle? So it's important for them to spend time on this essay. So I always recommend that over the summer, also again, summer before senior year, that they start thinking about that, especially since we give them the prompts in the spring. They can work on drafts in the summer and have teachers also look at it so that they could check for their grammar and content. For the extracurricular activities, as Ms. Holzer said, we have a great tool in Naviance where they can put their extracurricular activities, which don't only include just clubs in school. This also includes community service, enrichment programs, employment. Colleges can see how much a student is involved with and then how well they organize their time. Putting the activities on a senior resume is also very useful, because when you're filling out your application and you get to the activities section, if you've never really thought about, well, what have I been doing since the 9th grade, then you may miss out on putting things on that activities section that were really important and that should be on that activity section application. So it's good to start thinking about what have I been involved with since the 9th grade, and put it on Naviance and put it on the resume template that they have there, because it just organizes it better for you, and it's an easy thing to pull out when you're ready to fill out your application and are on that activity section. So, now the supporting documentation that we have there, some of the supporting documents, of course, is your high school transcript. And what the supporting documents are, it really just validates the student's application. The transcripts, the recommendation letters, all those things are very important for colleges to see, because it's not just about completing the application and putting in what courses you took, but how well you did in those courses, the rigor of the courses, and the recommendation letter speaks to the character of the student. The high school transcripts will have the courses of the students have taken over the last 3 years, and the final grades and the credits that they have earned. Most transcripts are usually sent by between October and January, and so the transcripts have only the senior year courses on them. And that's still important because it shows the colleges the rigor of the senior course. And it then allows the colleges to see, okay, well, these are the courses that this student is taking at this time. And when we send the senior grades, which are in the middle of the year, referred to as the mid-year report, which is after the first semester, they are expecting to see what grades they got for those courses. Okay. The recommendation letters. Well, by the spring of junior year, what we do is we ask students to ask at least 2 teachers for recommendation letters. My advice is always to ask a teacher where you felt that you were most challenged in the class. And that isn't always the class that you received the highest grade in. It's perhaps the class that you worked the most in. And that, is important, because I think that the teacher is able to write a letter that speaks about your motivation, your drive, how challenged you were, and how you thrived in the class because you were challenged. And I think that that's important because it does speak, again, to your character. So always think about choosing 2 teachers that can speak to that for you. Don't always think that you have to choose a class that you got the highest grade. That's not always the most important part. The most important part of the recommendation letter is so that they get to know you beyond just your transcript and beyond your grade. The standardized tests. So most colleges require an SAT or an ACT, and the schools that don't require it will be test optional. And what test optional means is that you don't have to send your SAT, but sometimes what that means is that they would like you to do an additional essay, answer specific questions for their college. So it's not just that, okay, well, I'm not going to send my SAT scores and I'm just going to write this one essay. Sometimes you have to do some additional work for that. During this time, like our current seniors, they've had a hard time taking their SAT and their ACT because most of them have not been administered. Test sites have canceled and closed and been canceled. So a lot of them didn't have the opportunity to take their SATs. And because of that, a lot of the colleges have become test optional. Now, the interesting thing that we've read in many articles is that some of the colleges don't intend to go back to looking at tests, or some of the colleges have thought that, you know, this pandemic has impacted the education of students as early as 9th grade. So for the next 3 years, they may be test optional and then go back to testing. So all those things are up to the college. And so before applying, when you're a senior, that's important to look at the requirements for each college. Documented interest. Okay, so that is also referred to as demonstrated interest. And what this does is it shows the colleges how interested and how enthusiastic the student is for the college. And there are several ways that a student can demonstrate interest in a college. A student can attend the college's open house, whether it's in person or virtually, because we're gonna keep hoping that in the spring you can go and visit your colleges. Or over the summer, even better. When there are virtual college fairs, they should attend and make sure they have the name of that school's regional admission counselor. And what that is that every college assigns an admission counselor to a particular region of the country. And so in other times, we would see the same admission counselor perhaps visits at TZ and the college fair in the areas. And you get to know that admission counselor, and the students kind of, like, if they introduce themselves, they can connect with them, network a little with them. They can still do that, because if it is that they're seeing them through virtual visits, and if it is that they're emailing them and asking them questions, then that makes a connection, and that is demonstrated interest. There's some schools that even have software that alerts them if a student opens up their email. And so to that, many students receive many emails from many colleges, but if it is that it's a top college and you're really interested, open that email, because they may be speaking specifically about a program or a visit or something that they would like you to take part in because you've demonstrated interest in their school. So that's pretty important. All right, so I can move on to the next slide, the PSAT, which is October 14th. So just to remember that the PSAT is a practice SAT. So as Ms. Keene mentioned, you know, it's nothing to worry about. It's a great jumping off point, a great tool that you can use in order to see, okay, what do I have to work on? Where do I have to, where are my strengths, and where do I have to strengthen any weakness that appears when you get your scores of your PSAT. So it's great to see what you should concentrate on before you take your SAT. There's no penalty for a wrong answer, so they should always try and answer every question. My two girls took, I paid for SAT prep courses, and a tip that they always gave them is that if it is that you begin the test and choose one letter, like the letter A, and decide that that's the letter for every really hard question or any question you were going to guess, that's the letter you were going to choose. So that was a tip. I paid a lot of money for that tip. There's also no essay on the PSAT, okay? And the PSAT is also when the juniors qualify or they take part in the National Merit Scholarship Qualifying Test. So that's the NMSQT, I'm sorry, I'm jumping around, that they participate in, and that's an academic scholarship competition. and qualifying juniors who receive high PSAT scores qualify for either becoming commended students or semifinalists. Tap and see if anyone's seen the website. Our homepage, we have 2 commended students and 1 semifinalist, and we're very proud of that. It's over 1 million, I think 1.5 million students who take the PSAT, so it's pretty impressive that we have students who qualified for it. We also, I just want to mention also that this year, as Ms. Keene said, we will be receiving our PSAT scores the first week of December. And when the students receive their score sheets, like I said, they will be able to look at what their strengths and their weaknesses are on different parts of the PSAT. And one great tool that College Board uses is Khan Academy. When they get their scores, they're able to match with Khan Academy. And since Khan Academy already has their PSAT, they can then send them practice tests that focus on where they have to build skills, so that it again helps them for their SAT. And it's free, so that's always a nice thing. And on that note, I'm going to hand it over to Mrs. Marks.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I know that there is a Yankees game on right now, so some of you are probably like, oh my God, to pay attention to 2 things at once. But I'm going to go through this kind of quickly. There is a lot of information, and it's the most fun subject, I think, which is the wide world of standardized testing. Most people ask, what do colleges prefer? Do they prefer the ACT or the SAT? The answer is colleges accept both. That being said, there have been a lot of changes due to the pandemic. So as Ms. Rivera was talking about, 2/3 of all 4-year colleges and universities are now test optional or test blind for this group of seniors. And that actually might extend into your grade as well. So there are a lot of schools not even requiring the SAT or ACT. It's over 1,500 schools right now. There's something called test blind and test optional. So under test optional, colleges will welcome your scores for students who wish to submit them and consider them a valuable data point. In contrast, if the school says they're test blind, it means they will not consider your standardized tests at all. The test optional list now includes nearly all of the nation's most selective universities and liberal arts colleges, more than 800 institutions ranked in the top tiers of their respective categories. So that's kind of good news for right now. But everything kind of has to be taken with a grain of salt because who knows what's going to happen a couple months from now. A few well-known institutions that still do require the ACT or SAT are the U.S. Service Academy, such as Annapolis, West Point, and the Air Force Academy. So they still require you to have tests. As a department, we do recommend taking tests if they are available. So what just happened was, most recently, a bunch of our seniors were not able to take the SAT last weekend because they were quarantined. So some of our seniors, unfortunately, will not have an SAT or ACT that is ready in time for their college applications, but it's okay because they're not the only ones that have had that happen, and colleges completely understand what's going on. How often should you take the SAT or ACT? My advice is not more than 3 times. Why spend the time and the money doing something that you A, hate to do, and B, studies have proven that your scores really don't go up after the 3rd time taking the test. So between the 1st and 2nd time, there seems to be a little bit of an uptick if you're studying and you're going over how to study properly for that exam. And sometimes between the 2nd and 3rd time, there's a little bit of an uptick, but after that, it's really not worth your time. A great resource that we use and that we tell parents and students to check often is fairtest.org. They are constantly updating which schools are test optional, which schools are blind, or which schools are still requiring the scores. going over a little bit of score choice. So there's a couple things you can do when you're sending your scores to colleges. Super scoring is the process where colleges consider your highest section scores from across all of the dates you took the SAT. On the current SAT, this means taking your highest math and your highest evidence-based reading across all test dates. This means you would send in all of the scores, and then the colleges are going to take your highest combination. This is different than score choice. With score choice, you can put your best foot forward by choosing which scores you send to colleges. So you choose the test date, but you cannot like mix and match. So you would just take your highest, you would send your highest seating, basically. This is really to use if you scored vastly different or higher on one SAT than another. So that's what I mean by your highest seating. Subject tests. What are subject tests? Subject tests were also called SAT-2s. They are 1 hour in length, and they are just one more way for a college to evaluate you. Yay. If you are going to take a subject test, it's good to take one that corresponds with your current coursework. So for example, if you are in AP Bio right now, you would be prepared for the subject test in biology. As of March 20th, 2020, no American college or university requires all high school applicants to submit subject tests. That's a fun fact. That was the date MIT announced they would no longer consider these tests in students' applications. In eliminating this requirement, MIT followed in the footsteps of Tufts, Harvey Mudd College, and many other schools. These tests are still part of the admissions landscape, though, even though universities don't require them for admission. A few still recommend. They use vague terms like optional, considered, and flexible. So while they're not exactly required, what happens is if you are applying to a specific program at a certain college, they would like or recommend for you to take those, especially if you are applying for programs in science or biology, stuff like that. It's worth also for you guys to know that international schools may want subject tests. So McGill University in Canada is a very popular school, and they require two subject tests. And many UK universities will allow subject tests instead of A levels, which is what they have in the UK system. Please note that schools that recommend subject tests expect to see your scores. So if they're recommending it and you're applying to a certain program, they want your scores. So some of those schools are Carnegie Mellon, Dartmouth, Duke, Yale. So pretty much like tier 1 universities and Ivy League schools. We do not send scores. That is the student's responsibility. So if you do wind up taking the SAT or the ACT, you will send your scores from those institutions directly to the colleges that you are applying to. Often the question is, what is the right test for me? I suggest taking a diagnostic that has both SAT and the ACT questions on it. There's a bunch of test prep companies that offer diagnostics that have both of those. So when you get your score back, you'll see which is the right test for you based on the questions that you answered correctly. So if you answered more ACT questions correctly on those diagnostics, then you would know that the ACT is the right score, the right test for you. Also recommend that you take the writing portion with either exam because some colleges require that. So for example, the UC system in California requires the writing portion. So if you take the SAT and you don't take the writing portion, you may miss out on applying to certain schools. Next slide. Application programs. Okay, so we have a bunch here. The most popular these days seems to be the early decision and early action. An option, so these are great options if you really have your heart set or if you definitely know where you're going. So when you apply early decision, you are telling that school, you're my number one choice. If I get in, I am going. early decision plans are binding. So you are agreeing to enroll into the college if admitted and offered a financial aid package that meets your needs. Some colleges have early decision 2, which has a later application deadline than the regular early decision plan. Then we have the early action. So what is early action? Early action, you get admission decisions from colleges earlier than usual, and it's not binding. So you do not have to enroll if you get in early. Some colleges have early action 2, which has a later application deadline. And again, that is also not binding. Another non-binding option is restrictive early action. So you aren't obligated to attend if accepted. However, if you apply restrictive early action, you may not apply to other schools in the early rounds. So applicants are expected to sign a statement if you agree to file only one early action application. This indicates to the school that you are the #1 choice, and it can significantly increase your chances of acceptance. Like early action applications, restrictive early action applicants have until May 1 to make their decision. Rolling admission. What is rolling admission? So I am a huge fan of rolling admission. If you are ready to apply to a college in the fall and you have all your stuff ready to go and your letters of rec ready to go, it basically means that you will hear within 6 to 8 weeks an admission decision. So sometimes, as Ms. Holzer was using the word safety school, maybe some of those schools that are safe on your list or that you would be comfortable going to if you did get in, you will hear back probably before you take that first bite of turkey on Thanksgiving, and you'll be happy knowing that at least you're going somewhere, which I think is really exciting and awesome because you'll find out, earlier than most colleges. And then we have regular decision, which is the deadlines are usually between January 1st and February 1st, depending on what schools you are applying to, and the applicants are notified by April 1st. Regular decision is not early. You'll be compared to a larger pool of applicants, and it's not binding, and you can apply to as many schools as you want with regular decision. And then, of course, the last one is priority, which basically means that the date by which your application, whether it's for college admission, sometimes it's student housing or financial aid, it must be received to be given the strongest consideration, and priority is also not binding. Next slide. And here's a map that shows where our graduates have attended college. So as you can see from the red, most of our students attend school on the East Coast, more so in New York, but the tri-state area. And then we do have a smattering across to the west, to California. Sometimes those people wind up coming back after a couple of years. You never know. It is far, and it costs a lot of money, and you can't come home every weekend to do your laundry. And then we have all up and down the East Coast. So all of this data, you guys can also look up when you start fooling around with Naviance. You'll see where students have gone, and I think that's actually the most fun part of all of this. So I believe that I am done, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Altman to finish this up.
Hi, folks. Thanks for hanging in with us. I noticed we're still right around the same amount of participants that we started with, so we appreciate that. Hope this is helpful information. And I didn't know I was going to be up against the Yankee game, so I apologize for that. I'll try to get through this. I'm a Met fan, so I very rarely have to worry about playoff games, but I'm sympathetic to you Yankee fans out there. And
it's 1-0.
Those of you who are fans of vice presidential debates, I promise we'll be done by 9 o'clock. Okay. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, and then we're going to have ample time for question and answers. Just some tips for parents. Try not to make college admissions a primary topic conversation at home. We know it's very important, but we don't want it to dominate your house either. So it doesn't have to be the dinner time conversation every day. If it gets to be too much, maybe just pick 1 or 2 nights a week where those are going to be your time to talk about college stuff. Same thing for them. It shouldn't be on their mind 24/7 either. So If they're talking about it maybe too much, maybe kind of pull them back a little bit. Next one is ask your son or daughter how you can help instead of telling him or her what to do. We know how much teenagers love to be told what to do. So I think this point is, kind of pretty obvious. But I like this kind of suggestion, ask them what maybe you could do for them, or even better, maybe say like, why don't we work on this together? Let's research this together. It's a way to kind of open up lines of communication. Have open and honest conversations about your feelings, desires, and reality. I think a couple of examples of this would be the reality. Good example is finances. So this was talked about a little earlier, I believe, maybe talking about openly about if there are financial constraints, let your son or daughter possibly know about that. So there's no last minute surprises. If the college that they want to go to just may not be affordable, if there are geographic restraints, I think it's important to discuss that also. If they're really eager to go out to California and that's a deal breaker for you, I think it's something to kind of talk out early rather than them getting their hopes up and then you kind of pulling out the rug for them at the last minute. Be a good listener. Sometimes students need to talk. I think that's pretty obvious. Remember, it's your son or daughter who is going to college. One quick anecdote that comes to mind, I think that highlights this. I remember a parent years ago, their son wanted to go to Boston schools and the response was, you know how much I hate Boston. And besides that, I'm a big Yankee fan. So I don't think we should be going to Boston. It's for them. So it's them that's going to college. So, keep an open mind to really what's a good fit for them and what will hopefully make them happy and lead to their success. Your success as a parent will not be measured by which school your child attends. I think Ms. Holzer mentioned this whole topic of prestige. If there is an award or something for prestige as a parent, I think it's in terms of colleges, helping them negotiate this college process as successfully as possible with not overwhelming anxiety and finding a school at the end that's a good fit for them where they're going to be happy and helps them in their future. And last but not least, I think next year want to put this on the top, use your school council for support. Each one of us has many years of experience. We've been doing this for a long time. I was going to say, I think, but I know we are all very good listeners. So use us as for support, use us as a source of information, but also, as a shoulder to lean on if you need to. So, keep the lines of communication open with us. Okay, next slide. Tips for students. Some of these are pretty much can overlap with the tips for parents. Take initiative and be organized. A good example of the initiative is for you juniors who might be listening or juniors out there to make appointments to come see us. When you have questions along the way, let it be you that comes to us with the questions. It's, sometimes it gets filtered through parents, which is okay, but it's probably better if the questions come directly from you. So you make appointments to see us. Staying organized, could really kind of encompass things like when you research schools, maybe keeping good notes. Some students like to develop a spreadsheet, keep a good system for remembering usernames and passwords for different accounts you have. This will help you keep it organized and make for a better college process. Be open to your parents and counsel suggestions. Keep an open mind. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Hopefully you do keep an open mind on both ends of things. You do not have to tell your friends everything. The college process can be a very and often too much of a public type of thing, especially with social media. I think it's important for students to know they don't have to share everything. They don't have to tell them every school they're looking at, or if maybe they want to go to a certain school and it's not an option for them. So they don't have to share everything. Use your counselor for support. I talked a little bit about that. I like this last one, this next to last one, think outside the box. That could really encompass a lot of things. It might be looking at schools that you never heard of before, but might be a good school for you. It could mean looking at schools in a geographic area you might not have considered. It could be looking at different kinds of programs at colleges, things like co-op programs, which is sort of a work study kind of program that some schools are strong in. So those are kind of some of the outside the box type of things that might mean going to community college. It also, one last thing, it also might mean looking at an honors program at a college. So maybe instead of going the most competitive college you can get into, it's looking at a college that's less competitive, but looking at the honors program within that college. So those are a few examples of thinking outside the box. This is actually my favorite part of the slide. Take time to relax and enjoy junior and senior year. Yes, all the college stuff and this year is important and we don't want to minimize that, but I think more important in some ways is to relax, enjoy junior year. We want the students to still do their extracurricular activities, sports, have a healthy social life, exercise. A couple of quotes that kind of come to mind that I think kind of highlights this is a quote from John Lennon, which is, "Life happens to you while you're making other plans." So that really goes for students and parents, and I think for all of us, and I have to remind myself. And then another quote from Ferris Bueller, one of my favorite movies. And a little bit of a Ferris Bueller day is not a bad thing every once in a while. Now, maybe just tone down a little bit from the day he had. Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop around and look once in a while, you could miss it. So enjoy junior year, enjoy the day while you're working on all these things. And the last slide, we wanted to make sure all of you are aware of support services that we have for all our students. And junior and senior year in particular, as we've discussed, can be a particularly overwhelming year for students. Certainly in the context of COVID and changes that have been thrust on us, it probably makes it even more stressful. So we want to be mindful of that. And our top priority is students' emotional well-being. So a few things, if you have concerns that there might be some emotional concerns of your juniors or seniors, things to maybe look out for, you can think about, or change of sleep habits and appetite and motivation. So we do have school social workers that are listed here, and two of us school psychologists. We're all here to help. I think the biggest takeaway from this, I think, is to use this as a sounding board. If you're concerned, even if it's better to be proactive. So even if it's something like, I noticed a little bit of a change, I wanted to kind of run it by you, see what you think, give one of us a call. It can be the counselor, it can be one of our support personnel also that you see listed here. On the high school website, there is a counseling link, and then you'll see a link for mental health. That'll give you the contact information for these people and also information about different mental health concerns that you could research as well. So that's my part of things, and I think we're going to jump right into Q&A now.
All right, so we'll use the chat feature for Q&A. I think some of these we answered as we went along in the presentation. One says, if we've already set up a College Board account, will we get two? And the answer is no. So when students prepare to take the PSAT, they fill out some bubble sheets with some identifying information, and that usually gets matched to the common application, I'm jumping ahead to senior year, to the College Board account. So students will be matched and they'll only have one account, they won't receive two. Will there be essay writing workshops provided by the school?
This is something we've always wanted to do. We have not yet gotten it off the ground. I think last year was probably the furthest we ever got with it. And then something called COVID happened. But we do feel like this would be a really great resource for students. We've toyed with the idea of maybe doing some summer workshops. We weren't really sure how much interest we would get from students. But I would encourage you, if this is something that you think your student would be interested in and would benefit, we know that a student would benefit from it. We will absolutely do what we can to put together some experts. We have a really great relationship with the head of the RCC Honors Program, who happens to be a professor of English, and she's absolutely phenomenal. So please reach out to us, reach out to me, send me an email, let me know if this is something you'd be interested in, and maybe we can put something together. We're always looking for new ideas for things like that. So great question, and reach out to us.
I would also point out, it's not a workshop, but on our We do have a video on our YouTube channel of Dr. Lynch, who Ms. Keen just mentioned, doing a presentation about college essay writing. So that can help too, kind of taking a look at that. It might give you some ideas.
Yeah.
How many colleges should students apply to? Do you help the students come up with their list, or do they come to you with schools they have in mind? So there's no target number. I'll say that the average number of applications that we see students put out ranges anywhere from, I would say 8 to 12 is probably most common, but I think we've all seen students apply to 3 schools, and I think we've all seen students apply to 20 schools. There's no right or wrong, but I do think as students do more research and they really develop an idea of what it is they're interested in and what they're looking for in a college, 20 can usually be a bit excessive. And we do try and, scale it back. But if a student is really confident that they've chosen 3 schools they'd be happy to go to, and we feel very confident they'll be admitted to those schools, 3 can be a target number too. There's no right or wrong number of colleges, but I'd say the average is about 8 to 12. And when we sit down together in those junior family conferences, we do try and tease out what some of those interests might be and what some of the factors that would, interest them in a college list would be. And we do suggest a list of schools for them to start off with for research. My son hasn't been introduced to Naviance. Would the school be helping out with that? So that was, something that we were forced to do virtually last year. We would have liked the opportunity, to push into classes as we normally would, so that we could walk students through the registration process for Naviance and oversee that they've completed the interest inventory. But our orientation to the program last year had to be virtual. That virtual orientation is still up on our YouTube channel, and students can watch that for an overview of the program, and we recommend that. It would be helpful to say to your child, have you heard of this program? And if they haven't, direct them to that YouTube channel. But if they're having trouble getting going with that registration process, they can always reach out to their counselor as well, and we'll register them and happy to give them a tutorial also.
Yeah, I would say that's actually a really good question, because we are going to need parents' help, more than ever with some of these things, because unfortunately, the kids are home a lot more now, so we, things that we would normally try and get into their classrooms and do. First of all, some of them just aren't here in the school at all. Some of them are, most of them are here one week and off the next week. So we might need parents to kind of be our support a little bit more than usual, and maybe trying to get them to do some of that stuff at home. But if they're, like Ms. Holzer said, if there's any trouble trying to find the link, or if you or your student has no idea what Naviance is, can't find the link, can't find anything like that, reach out to your counselor and we'll walk you through the process.
When do students start sitting with counselors senior year? The first day of school. So we actually kick off this process. We hope to do it sooner than the start of senior year, and really start speaking specifically to them in that family conference that we mentioned. And that's really the first more formal point of contact is that family conference. But then we will continue to touch base and work with students from that family conference through, the submission button on the applications, which the timeline is typically that about 60% of students will apply somewhere by November 1st of their senior year. And then the second round of deadlines is that the majority of students will have all applications out by January 1st of senior year. And we work very closely through more formal meetings together, and then an awful lot of more informal check-ins that I guess everyone could attest to right now, that we're very closely working with our class of 2021.
That's correct.
Good refresher the second time around. Good. Somebody who survived the first time around.
Still with us.
And then, thank you for all this important information.
So the next one, it says, so you won't be meeting with students. We're regularly meeting with students over, from all grades, just so you know. over all kinds of issues. In terms of juniors, right now, we're not specifically reaching out to them and setting up individual meetings. That doesn't mean we're not available to them to do so. So if they want to have an early discussion or discuss college now or have questions or about, it doesn't have to be about college or about anything, we are available by appointment, and that includes students who are out full-time on remote. I think we can all attest, we're doing Zoom and in-person meetings pretty much from the time we come in till the time we leave. So we're available to meet with any student that would like to meet with us at this point. I believe towards the end of around getting closer to the holidays is when we're likely to send out the invite for junior college conferences, if we follow the same timeline as last year. But anybody who would like to meet with us, we are available.
How much more difficult are the SATs from the PSAT?
That's a good question. I think that I'm not sure if it's a different level of difficulty. I do believe it's a different level of knowledge, being that they recognize that students are taking the PSAT in the fall of their junior year, and most students typically take their first SAT in the spring of their junior year. So sometimes we have students chomping at the bit to actually take their SAT in the fall, and we often have to remind them that the math class that they may be currently enrolled in is the absolute best prep for the math section of the SAT, and same can be said for the English. So they adjust it slightly based on where the student is, because at the end of the day, even SAT and ACT, they all, kind of admit that high school is the absolute best prep. So the courses that the student is currently taking is the best prep for any of these standardized tests. So you're taking your PSAT in October, and oftentimes you take your SATs or ACTs in March, April, May, June. So you just have that much more schooling under your belt.
Also, the test covers up through, if you're in geometry, it's really going, you're on the SAT or the ACT, it's going through algebra 2. So sometimes you'll see a very big difference in your scoring between the time you take it the PSAT in junior year as opposed to the real test, the ACT or SAT, in the beginning of your senior year, because you'll have another year of math under your belt, which you haven't even learned yet. So I think that's also something to think about.
Just one more thing too, is that between the PSAT and the SAT, you can always practice the SAT. Most of the prep courses, that's what it is. It's actually practicing the test. So you just practice your time, and you can buy a book at Barnes & Noble and do that. Or like I mentioned, when College Board and Khan Academy match and do your practice test, that helps a lot. So you'll have that opportunity to do that also.
If a child is struggling right now with remote learning, how much will this impact them for college? So remote learning, I'd have to say that every representative that we're talking to right now in college admissions is explaining to us that they're going to be looking at the high school transcript with kind of what we would describe as an asterisk next to the spring, the second semester of what would have been these students' sophomore year, and then this current year. That said, the high school transcript does carry the most weight in this process. It's the most heavily evaluated piece of the puzzle. So a student, doing well in their classes is going to serve them well in the college process. So if a student is struggling right now with remote learning, we do encourage that you reach out to the classroom teacher in the areas where they might be struggling, that you reach out to us to lend a little insight into what's going on. But I do think that the lens in which college admissions counselors are looking at the high school transcript is going to change for this current climate, taking it into account. is Naviance information private, or can others view it? Guidance, colleges, can we use this as a worksheet filling out as you get the information in different areas on Naviance, inventory, surveys, resume, keeping research on colleges? So Naviance is a each student has their own account, and it is private information. It is not sent out to colleges. What students do in their participation on entrance inventories, the resume builder, that is all their college search list. That's all private information. We as counselors can access the student's Naviance account and see that information. Parents can ask their children to share their usernames and passwords to log in. Nothing is really all that private. You're certainly not asking for their Instagram login username and password. It would not be the same level of confidentiality that they would guard that with, that they'd probably guard their Naviance account information with. So, you can ask for that to play around on the program as well. When we send supporting documentation, so now we're fast forwarding to the fall of senior year. When we send out supporting documentation to colleges that Mrs. Rivera talked about, the letters of recommendation, the transcript, that does go through Naviance, but that is, students will fill out release forms and a lot of paperwork in order for us to send out that documentation, but nothing that they do for their college prep and research is information that will be sent out to colleges. Okay. Are minors in college optional? That really varies, I think, by institution. I'm going to say there's a lot of colleges out there that don't even, what do they call the ones that don't do general education requirements? They have like open majors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could create your own.
Create your own majors. But for the most part, I'd say there's a number of colleges where it's optional. There's a number of colleges where you could double major, single major. So it varies, I think, across the board by institution.
It also depends on what you want to do in life. Like if you want to go to law school, but you are an English major and you want a minor in history, or like Ms. Holzer said, you could double major and not have a minor. So it depends what your plan is.
It also, if I could jump in, it brings up a really good point that I think sometimes gets lost. It kind of sounds a little corny, but you could actually say colleges are like, what do they say? Like snowflakes or thumbprints or, fingerprints. Every single college does things very different to the college next door or the college down the street. So if you ever hear someone make a bold statement, a black or white statement based on college, it's most likely not accurate, because there's so much middle ground. Every college does things differently. One college will make you choose a minor. Another college won't even let you choose a minor. One college wants you to have 2 letters of recommendation. Another college won't even read a letter of recommendation. So you really have to try and remember that even though we're talking about college, each and every college is so individual. It makes the process, I guess you could say, richer, but it also makes the process a little bit more cumbersome, because you do have to remember that each and every college might have very different application procedures, very different admissions policies. There's really so much, and that's where, once again, you really want to lean on us with all of those questions, because there's really no possible way within the next 8 to 10 months you could learn all of this. So always reach out to us with any of those little nuanced questions, because it is different at every college.
Also, lean on the college admissions reps. They are a great resource for you also. So any college that you might be exploring and you have questions about requirements, majors, things like that, I would contact the admissions rep directly. Actually, not you, the student. Actually your son and daughter should contact them directly with those questions.
Yes.
And then
That's
it shows demonstrated interest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But a really good point. Can I even emphasize that though, Mr. Altman? When reaching out to college representatives, it's very important that the student is making the point of contact, that it's not coming from a parent. Colleges take note of that. If the only person reaching out to them is the parent versus the student, that can actually hurt a student's application. When taking the PSAT, SAT, do you have to select what colleges the scores are shared with at the time you take the test, or can you share it later? Good question.
So you can choose to send your scores the day of the test if you're feeling very confident, and it's also free if you send your scores the day that you take the SAT or ACT. But you can, of course, wait until you get your scores back and then send them that way. So it depends on your confidence level and I guess your deadlines as well. So if you're taking, if you're scrambling to take a test right before, November 15th deadline, you may just want to blindly send your scores if you're confident. But most kids take them early enough so then they can get their scores back and then they would send them to each individual college.
Yeah.
And if I can ease any fears for students who might be listening, the PSATs are not sent to any colleges.
No,
that is a practice test.
Right.
And then students who are full-time remote who are not able to fill out the bubble sheet, what should they do? I think some information may have been sent out in an e-blast about that today, but students who are in school in the hybrid model had an opportunity to fill out some bubble sheets. Students who are fully remote, who are coming in just for the purpose of taking the PSAT, will have the opportunity to fill in those bubble sheets the morning of the test.
And if you're choosing not to send your student in to take the PSAT at all, that's okay too. Every year we have students who, get sick the day of the test or have different situations going on. Not taking the PSAT on October 14th, is it?
Yep.
It's fine. You don't have to worry about taking there is no makeup. You don't have to really stress yourself out too much about it. Some students miss it and then they just take a bunch of practice exams at home in their kitchen with a timer and any of the online tools that they can use. So even if your student cannot take it, it's okay.
The next question asks is if there's any advantage to sending scores in blindly. Do the schools take any of that into consideration? And the answer is no. There's no difference in the consideration of SAT scores if they're sent the day of the test versus if they're sent 3 weeks later when the student gets the scores and can view them. Most students are much more comfortable viewing the scores before sending them to colleges.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're slowing down on questions. I'm sorry if I missed the first part of this talk. Is there a timeline somewhere that lays out what to be thinking about from fall junior year until college acceptance? So we will post this presentation, and so there is an opportunity to go back and get a general sense of timeline. But there's also, I think, a general timeline on the counseling department website too that you can refer to.
Yep.
I'll emphasize again that the most important thing that students can be doing to support their college applications is working hard in junior year, making their primary focus and the dedication, their success in their current classes that they're taking, making college admissions really a side job to that.
Mm-hmm. And the best thing that parents can do this year is to, as cumbersome as I know those emails can be, I know myself, I just feel like I'm constantly getting emails from my children's schools, and I know it's a lot, but it is our best way of communicating with you. So if you feel like you haven't heard from us in a while and you're not really sure what to do, please feel free to reach out to us, but also maybe check your email and see if maybe there was an email in there that maybe invited you to come to meet with us to kind of start this process. So I know the email can get a bit much. It's, I'm still trying to get my brother, who's a junior parent out there somewhere, to read his emails. And I can't even get him to do it. So I get it, but maybe don't delete them. Keep them there. And then if you have a question, maybe you can search your email and find the answer. That's my email plug. Anything else? Are we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, our social media too. Please refer to that. We do try and post things that come through on there. The YouTube channel is we've been talking about how valuable it is because it's one of maybe the pros that have come out of this time is that they're recorded, so they can go back and they can be looked at. And even though the information might vary a bit year to year, a lot of this information stays very much stays the same. So you can go back and you can look at information that was posted for last year's classes that might be helpful to look at for this year as you're getting into this process a bit more.
There's a great video on the YouTube channel that the juniors should watch, and it features some seniors that graduated this past June about the application process and speaking to college reps and how they navigated high school and all of that. So definitely check out our social media.
Yeah.
And Mr. Altman promised that we would end before the vice presidential debates, and he is a man of his word. So we are going to, in the interest of that time and approaching 9 o'clock, we're going to close out our presentation, and thank you, everybody who hung in with us tonight for this information. We know it's overwhelming. We know it can be a lot to process. This is the start of the conversation. This is by no means the end of it. So please continue to reach out with any questions that you might have. And please encourage your sons and daughters to pop in and ask us questions as they're starting to think about this process as well. So again, thank you so much.
All
Good
right,
night, folks.
everybody. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Have a great night.
Night.
Thank you.